Hello everyone, hope you guys are all having a wonderful day, and today we are doing the second episode of my new Kerbal Space Program series. Specifically today we're going to be doing recreations of the Gemini Capsule and the Saturn 1B. So currently what I'm building here is the Gemini Spacecraft and Titan rocket that it was launched on, which was just like the Mercury capsule, a ballistic missile where they took out the nuclear warheads and put a capsule on. The rocket itself used hypergolic propellants, which those are just some of the nastiest stuff that couldn't be used for this. The propellants they used for the first and second stages was actually nitrogen tetroxide and hydrazine, which were both famously toxic, and really the only benefit they had was that they would ignite on contact, so you didn't need a complicated ignition setup like you would with cryogenic propellants. But of course, KSP doesn't differ between cryogenic and hypergolic propellants. It's all just liquid fuel oxidizer general fuel types. And now we have a liftoff. I decided to keep it straight for the first couple minutes of the flight until we got to over 100 meters per second, because the first stage thrust to weight ratio wasn't ideal. It does look better than it did while playing it because I speed this up in post. And now we're just performing the gravity turn to try to get into orbit. And the first stage is about to run out of fuel right now, and we have first stage separation. And while we're getting into orbit, I'm going to talk about the Gemini program for a bit. There were four main goals: to demonstrate the endurance of humans. Basically, could people survive in space from either 8 days to 2 weeks? To see the effectiveness of rendezvous and docking with another vehicle in space, and to maneuver the combined spacecraft to dock. To demonstrate EVA, so you could do a spacewalk. And finally, to perfect techniques of atmospheric reentry, so they could land somewhere close to a recovery vehicle. And on that second ascent, you just saw one of the clamps I had didn't really deploy that well. I did not do the staging correctly. And this is going to have just the same ascent profile as the other one, although since we had a bit of that rough start, we're going to be trying to get it more accurate. And now we have first stage separation, and we are going to just be trying to get in a similar orbit to the approaching spacecraft. I do not know what the exact place you're supposed to be to rendezvous with another craft from low Kerbin orbit, but usually it's about a quarter of a way behind you, but that can be changed if your craft has a higher or lower thrust to weight ratio. And now I'm just trying to maneuver to get into relatively close to it. If you can get within 6 kilometers of your target and have enough fuel, you just basically cancel out your velocity, burn towards it, and rinse and repeat till you get close enough. And now we're just trying to use the reaction control thrusters to cancel out. And I'm going to be using the Lown method of docking, where you basically point both craft at each other, then burn towards it. You can do it with small crafts like this or when you're doing Apollo-style docking, but it doesn't really work with space stations. And now we are almost there. Just do a little puff, and we are docked. It's the first dock of this set. Okay, next what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be simulating an event that happened in the Gemini program. I am right here simulating what happened on Gemini 8. One of the reaction control system thrusters actually got stuck and caused the spacecraft to spin uncontrollably, and Neil Armstrong had to save it and keep it from spinning out of control. That's actually something a lot of people forget about Neil Armstrong, because he didn't just do the landing on the moon, he also did Gemini 8, where you just saw it spun around because the reaction control thruster, and was in an X-15 flight where it bounced off the atmosphere. And now we are going to deorbit this capsule and try to aim for water, because the Gemini capsules did land in water. And now we're just going to point retrograde and fire those small motors on the bottom of the spacecraft. Some interesting things about the Gemini program. On Gemini 4, there was the first American EVA, The first EVA entirely was, I believe, Alexei Leonov. On Gemini 8, the first ever space docking was achieved with the uncrewed China target vehicle with Neil Armstrong. Gemini 10 established that radiation at high altitudes is not a problem, and even further demonstrated the ability to rendezvous. And Gemini 11 set the highest orbit, the crewed Earth orbit, at 739.2 nautical miles, and that record still stands today. Now going back to Kerbal Space Program, we have successfully completed the re-entry and are using the parachutes to slow down. Fun fact, the original concept for the Gemini capsule, it would have used something called a Regala wing, which was basically a paraglider that would inflate after re-entry, and it would glide down like an airplane, but it turns out it was just too complicated and too unstable to actually be used. And next we are going to be creating a replica of the Saturn 1B. This was not the rocket that brought humans to the moon. It was the rocket that would lift the Apollo capsule into low Earth orbit for standard testing and for the Apollo-Soyuz test project. Some interesting thing about this rocket. The first stage used kerosene and liquid oxygen for the first stage, or Kerolox. And what they did was they took 8 of the fuel tanks used for the Mercury Redstone rocket and just put them all into the first stage. And what I just realized I neglected to put on the rocket was that the first stage had 8 fins for aerodynamic stability. I also stuck one of the RS-25 engine replicas in the middle just so we could have some gimbaling. And now we are just doing our gravity turn, and the first stage is run out, and I've used those Ullage motors to separate the two craft. The launch abort system should be jettisoned about now, and now we are going to use this upper stage to get us a lot of the way into orbit, but we are still going to need the Apollo command and service module to get fully into orbit. Two other interesting things about the Saturn 1B, it used the same instrument unit or computer as the Saturn V to get into orbit, and they were also going to use it to reboost the Skylab mission, but that never turned out and it was just deorbited over Australia, where the Aussies then promptly fined NASA $400 for littering. And now that I'm done with my rant about Skylab and the Australians fining NASA $400 for littering, now the Apollo capsule is about to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. I guess it's not called that in the game, but it's from the Making History DLC, and it's a replica. So I'm pretty confident with saying that it's the Apollo capsule. Now, just trying to maximize the amount of ablator we get by raising our periapsis to about 30 kilometers, then deploying that drogue chute to slow us down. That is actually a parachute meant for the Gemini and Mercury capsules in the game, but I use it for the Apollo capsule just because it looks more like the actual parachutes used. And we have splashdown, and we are going to recover the vessel. So I hope you guys all liked the video. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and hit the like button. All of you have a wonderful day.